Yes. Yes, in reference to the culture wars, you mentioned several of the megaphones that the secular left has at their disposal without much countervailing force to that. You addressed what could be done on the university side, looking forward. Hollywood was the first megaphone that you mentioned. Is there a mechanism for getting word out about movies that we should boycott versus movies that we should see? Because to the extent that the tens of millions of Americans who are in conformance with our viewpoints tonight are aware, they can act and hit Hollywood at least a little bit in its pocketbook, which goes a long way to perhaps having them reshape what they expose to us in ways that are more reflective of our values.
Okay, we're asking him to respond to that. Thank you.
So, I mentioned a little moment ago about making a movie and releasing it in the summer in July. So the movie will open probably in 2,000 theaters all over the country. What happens to that movie in opening weekend is absolutely critical. If the movie does well in opening weekend, it'll be in 3,000 theaters the next week. If it does poorly, it'll go from 2,000 to 1,500 theaters in 1 week. So here's my point. You mentioned boycotting movies. A very small thing that you could do that's super helpful is go to the movie on opening weekend. Right? You can say, well, I'd rather watch it on DVD. Well, do that also. But if you go watch it opening weekend, you're essentially multiplying the velocity of that film. Because all of Hollywood is watching that movie and how it does. And its power to explode, to reach independent voters, a lot of that depends on how it does the first weekend. So that's a really small thing to do. You may want to go anyway, and it's $10. So if you can go, take friends, go that time, it's much better than doing it 3 weeks later or buying it on DVD. So that's a small, just a, like inside information of how to actually, if you want to help, that's a great way to help. Do it then. Now, boycotting movies is a weak weapon because it's really hard to organize huge boycotts. It's much more effective to make movies. My formula for making movies is, well, I go to investors and I tell them to invest money, which I will then use to make a movie, which will then make money that will then go back to them so that they can do it again. I call this recycled philanthropy. And it's recycled because it's the same dollar going around the block again and again and again. So that's how I do movies, but I have no illusion that Michael Moore is the big man in Hollywood. He's not. The big man in Hollywood is Steven Spielberg. The most effective way that Hollywood tells stories is not by documentary films, but by romantic comedies and thrillers and horror films and animated films. So Christians need to make those. The most effective films aren't Christian films. They are films that happen to be from a Christian outlook. C.S. Lewis made this point very emphatically. He was thinking about clergy and politics. And he said, the most effective people in politics aren't necessarily cardinals and bishops and pastors, but rather Christian lawyers and Christian lobbyists and Christian doctors and Christian activists in the field. So I think we need the same with movies.